Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Weight of Ordinary Days. Grady Massey had always prided himself on noticing details. As a high school history teacher, he'd spent 15 years reading between the lines of student excuses and administrative doublespeak. But somehow, he'd missed the signs in his own home. The marriage had been good once. 8 years ago, Christine Cobb had walked into his life like a perfectly wrapped gift, beautiful, charming, attentive. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveled often, and made twice his salary. Grady never minded. He loved his job, loved shaping young minds, loved the quiet satisfaction of a well-taught lesson. But lately, something fell off. It started small. Christine's phone, once casually left on counters, now lived in her purse. Her overnight work trips doubled. She'd started going to the gym at odd hours, coming home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't hers. When Grady suggested they try for the baby they'd always talked about, she'd snapped at him for the first time in their marriage. "Not now, Grady. My career is at a critical point." Then came the stomach problems. 3 months ago, he'd started experiencing persistent nausea, headaches, and fatigue. His doctor ran tests. Everything came back inconclusive. "Probably stress," the doctor said. "Try to relax more." Grady tried. He cut back on coffee, ate better, started taking vitamins Christine helpfully bought for him. Nothing changed. If anything, the symptoms worsened after she returned from her trips. Last Tuesday, Christine's laptop froze during a video call. She'd cursed, slammed it shut, and asked if Grady could take it to that IT guy at his school. She'd said it with casual indifference, already walking away to pack for another trip. "His name is Lionel," Grady had said to her retreating back. Lionel Hoover had worked at Roosevelt High for a decade, managing everything from the ancient server systems to teachers' personal tech problems. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes and a photographic memory. He and his wife Frida had attended Grady's wedding, and their kids were in Grady's AP history class. Friday morning, Grady dropped off the laptop before first period. "Should be quick," Lionel said, examining the sleek device. "Probably just needs a cleaning and reboot. I'll call you when it's done." Grady taught 3 classes that day: the French Revolution, the Treaty of Versailles, and the fall of the Roman Empire. All lessons about how the powerful always believed they were invincible until the moment they weren't. At 2:15 p.m., during his planning period, his desk phone rang. "Grady," Lionel's voice was tight. "Come to my office. Now, don't mention it to anyone." The IT office was in the basement, a windowless room filled with humming servers and the blue glow of monitors. When Grady arrived, Lionel was standing by the door. His usually calm face looked gray. "Close it," Lionel said. Grady shut the door. "What's wrong?" Lionel didn't answer. He walked to his desk, typed something, then turned the laptop screen toward Grady. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," Lionel said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to file for divorce. Today. Right now. Don't go home first. Don't call Christine. Don't give her any warning whatsoever." Grady's stomach dropped. An affair. It had to be an affair. He'd suspected, but hoped. "It's not just an affair," Lionel said, reading his face. "Grady, I found these." He clicked a folder. Messages filled the screen. Grady leaned closer, reading. His blood turned to ice. "From Christine to T. The new dosage is working. He's getting weaker. Doctor says stress. LOL. Maybe 2 more months. From T to Christine. Good. Don't rush it. We did it too fast with Richard, and people ask questions. Slow is clean. From Christine to T. Policy is $750,000. We split it, then Mexico like we planned. God, I can't wait to be done with this boring life." Grady's vision blurred. He gripped the desk. "There's more," Lionel said quietly. "A lot more. Plans, timelines, research on untraceable poisons. And Grady, there are files about a Richard Cobb, Christine's first husband. He died 5 years ago. Accidental carbon monoxide poisoning." The room spun. Grady sank into a chair. "I've already made copies," Lionel continued. "Everything is on 3 encrypted drives. One for you, one for the police, one for my safe. You need to get to a lawyer before she knows you know." Grady looked up at his friend. She's been poisoning me. Yes. She murdered her first husband. It looks that way. And she's planning to kill me. Lionel's jaw tightened. Not if we stop her first. But Grady, if she even suspects, she might accelerate the timeline. These people are dangerous. This Terrell Munoz, I found his background. He has 2 assault charges that were dropped, and he was questioned in another suspicious death 3 years ago. Grady's hand shook. Not from fear, from rage. Pure, cold, calculating rage. His brilliant wife, his charming Christine, was a murderer. She'd lain beside him, smiled at him, kissed him, all while planning his death. I'm not running, Grady said, his voice steady despite the fury. I'm not hiding. Grady. No. He looked at Lionel. She thinks I'm weak. Boring. Easy to manipulate. She thinks she's smarter than everyone. A dark smile crossed his face. I teach history, Lionel. I know how this story ends for people like her. They always make a mistake. They always get too confident. What are you going to do? Grady stood. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. And then I'm going to destroy her. Chapter 2. The game begins. Grady didn't go home that night. Using cash, he checked into a hotel across town and sat on the bed, staring at the encrypted drive Lionel had given him. His laptop was open, displaying folders full of Christine's messages, research files, and financial documents. He read everything. Christine Massey, née Cobb, born in Baltimore to working-class parents. Dropped out of college twice. Married Richard Cobb at 25. Richard, a successful pharmaceutical rep with a $500,000 life insurance policy. Richard died at 32 of accidental carbon monoxide exposure in his garage. Christine collected the insurance, invested wisely, and moved to a new city. 3 years later, she met Grady at a friend's wedding. Sweet, beautiful, just vulnerable enough to seem real. Grady had fallen hard. They married within a year. She'd taken out a $750,000 policy on him 6 months into their marriage. Just being responsible, she'd said. Grady had signed without question. Terrell Munoz was harder to trace. The messages revealed he was Christine's high school boyfriend who'd reconnected with her through social media. He'd done time for assault, worked sporadically as a personal trainer, and had expensive tastes. The messages between them went back 4 years, meaning they'd started planning before Richard Cobb's death. Grady's hands clenched. They'd probably killed Richard together. The poisoning research was meticulous. Thallium sulfate they'd settled on. Odorless, tasteless, and in small doses over months, nearly impossible to detect. Symptoms mimicked stress-related illness. Most doctors never tested for it. By the time someone thought to check, the victim was usually already dead or too far gone to save. She'd been putting it in his vitamins. Grady looked at the bottle on his nightstand. The vitamins he'd brought with him out of habit. His stomach turned. He threw them in the trash. His phone buzzed. Christine, where are you? Everything okay? He stared at the message. The caring wife, worried about her husband. He wanted to type what he really thought. Wanted to scream at her, expose her, watch her panic. Instead, he breathed and thought like a chess player. Emotion was the enemy of strategy. Sorry, grab a hotel. Not feeling well, didn't want to drive. Be home tomorrow. Oh, honey, do you need me to come get you? Which hotel? She wanted to know where he was. Probably to tell Terrell. Probably to make sure he was actually sick and not suspicious. No, I'm fine. Just need rest. See you tomorrow. He turned off his phone. At 8 a.m. Saturday, Grady met with Vernon McConnell, a divorce attorney Lionel had recommended. Vernon was a bulldog, late 50s, gray mustache, and a reputation for taking down wealthy spouses who thought they were untouchable. This is attempted murder, Vernon said after reviewing the evidence. We need to go to the police immediately. Not yet, Grady said. Mr. Massey, hear me out. Grady leaned forward. If we go to police now with digital evidence, she gets a lawyer, claims the laptop was hacked or the messages are fake. Terrell backs her up. They've done this before and gotten away with it. We need them to act. We need them to incriminate themselves beyond any doubt. Vernon studied him. What are you proposing? I keep pretending everything is normal. Let them think the poison is working. Let them get comfortable and sloppy. Meanwhile, we document everything every interaction, every dose, every meeting they have. We build a case so airtight they can't wiggle out. That's dangerous. If they decide to accelerate, I stop taking anything she gives me. I'll dump the vitamins, avoid any food or drink she prepares. I'll get checked by a doctor immediately and start chelation therapy to remove what's already in my system. Grady's eyes were hard, but I need time. Time to prove Richard's death wasn't an accident. Time to connect Terrell to other crimes. These people have been getting away with murder. I want to make sure they never hurt anyone again. Vernon was quiet for a long moment. You're playing a very dangerous game. I know. And you're sure you can pull this off? Pretend everything is normal while your wife tries to kill you. Grady smiled grimly. I'm a teacher. I've been pretending to be interested in teenagers' excuses for 15 years. I can handle one lying murderer. Vernon's mustache twitched. All right, but I'm documenting everything. And if I think you're in immediate danger, I'm calling the police whether you like it or not. Fair enough. They spent the next 3 hours crafting a plan. Vernon would hire a private investigator to tail Christine and Terrell, document their meetings, and dig into Richard Cobb's death. Grady would install hidden cameras in his house, wear a recording device, and keep detailed logs. They'd also coordinate with Lionel to monitor Christine's laptop and phone remotely. By the time Grady left Vernon's office, he had a strategy. Now he just needed to execute it. He went home at noon. Christine's car was in the driveway. He found her in the kitchen, and the moment she saw him, concern flooded her face. Grady, God, you look awful. Are you feeling any better? He let himself sway slightly. A little, still pretty weak. She rushed over, touching his forehead. Her hand was cool, gentle. The hand of a killer. You're warm. Have you eaten? Not much appetite. Let me make you something light. And you should take your vitamins. She reached for the bottle on the counter. A new one, he noted. She'd replaced the one he took to the hotel. Thanks. He took the bottle, then made a show of clutching his stomach. Actually, maybe after I rest. Feeling nauseous again. Of course. Go lie down. I'll check on you soon. Grady went to the bedroom and closed the door. He dumped the new vitamins in his pocket, then lay on the bed. Through the door, he heard Christine on the phone, voice low. He's getting worse. No. He went to a hotel, but came back. I don't know, maybe a few more weeks. I can't just kill him, T. It has to look natural. Grady smiled at the ceiling. Let her think she was winning. Let them both get comfortable. The real game was just beginning. Chapter 3. Pieces in Position. Over the next 2 weeks, Grady became a different man. By day, he was the weakening husband, complaining of headaches and exhaustion, letting Christine fuss over him while secretly discarding every pill and supplement she offered. By night, he was a strategist, reviewing surveillance footage, coordinating with Vernon's investigator, and piecing together the full scope of Christine's crimes. The private investigator, a sharp woman named Linda Hansen, worked fast. She tailed Christine to 3 separate meetings with Terrell Munoz at a motel outside town. She photographed them together, documented Christine withdrawing large cash sums, and traced Terrell's movements to a storage unit registered under a fake name. Want to know what's in the unit? Linda asked during a meeting in Vernon's office. What? Grady asked. Documents. IDs with different names, fake passports, and some paperwork connected to another death. A woman named Stella Lester in Arizona 3 years ago. She was dating Terrell. Died of a heart condition at 31. Healthy, no prior issues. Sound familiar? Grady's blood ran cold. How many people have they killed? At least 3 that I can prove. Probably more. Linda slid a folder across the table. Richard Cobb, Stella Lester, and they were in contact with a Roy Gross in Nevada who died in a suspicious hiking accident. Roy's sister never believed it was an accident. She's been trying to get the case reopened for years. Vern leaned back. This is bigger than attempted murder. This is a serial killing team. Grady stared at the photos. Christine and Terrell, smiling, planning, destroying lives without remorse. Rage bubbled up, but he forced it down. Emotion was the enemy. How do we prove it? He asked. We need Richard's body exhumed, Vernon said. If we can prove thallium poisoning, we can reopen his case. Combined with the laptop evidence, Christine's financial records showing large cash withdrawals before each death and the storage unit contents. We can build a pattern. And we need them to make a mistake, Linda added. They're careful, but they're also arrogant. Your wife thinks you're dying quietly. She's already planning her next life. I found emails about property in Mexico, booked under her maiden name. Grady nodded slowly. An idea was forming. What if we gave them a reason to rush? What do you mean? Vernon asked. They're planning to wait another month or two. Let the poison do its work so my death looks natural. But what if I suddenly got a windfall? What if the stakes got higher? Linda's eyes narrowed. You think they'd get impatient? I know they would. Greed is their weakness. Grady pulled out his phone and showed them a text chain with his principal, Roosevelt Goodwin. The school board just approved a grant I applied for, $200,000 for a new history program. The board wants to make a big announcement, maybe even a news story about the innovative teacher who secured funding. Vernon caught on. If Christine thinks you're about to become locally famous, that you'll be under more scrutiny, and if she thinks the life insurance might increase because of the grant, because of my higher profile, Grady's smile was cold. She'll panic. She'll rush. And rushing people make mistakes. It's risky, Linda warned. If they panic, they might try something more direct. That's what I'm counting on. Right now, we have evidence of intent, but not action. We need them to move, to do something overt that we can document and prove beyond doubt. Grady's voice was steady. And I have a plan for that too. He laid it out. The grand announcement would happen in 3 days at a school assembly. Grady would mention casually to Christine that the board was suggesting he increase his life insurance given his new valuable status to the district. He'd make her think the payout could double. Meanwhile, Vernon would arrange for Richard Cobb's exhumation and expedited toxicology. Linda would increase surveillance. And Grady would install additional cameras and recording devices throughout the house, including in his own food and drinks, to catch Christine in the act. If she tries to give me a large dose, thinking she needs to finish this quickly, we'll have video evidence, Grady explained. And if she or Terrell try something more direct, an accident, we'll be ready for that too. You're using yourself as bait, Vernon said. I'm a teacher. I've broken up fights, dealt with angry parents, survived school board meetings. Grady's eyes were hard as flint. I can handle 2 murderers who think I'm too weak and stupid to see them coming. The plan was set. Grady went home that night to find Christine cooking dinner, something she rarely did anymore. The smell of garlic and wine filled the kitchen. You're up, she said brightly. I made your favorite. Chicken piccata. Smells amazing. He watched her plate the food, watched her hand linger near his glass of wine. Actually, I have good news. It might help with my mood. Oh, she brought the plates to the table, eyes curious. I got the grant. The big one. $200,000 for the program. He smiled, watching her face. Roosevelt says they might do a press release, maybe even get local news involved. He thinks it could put the school on the map. Christine's smile flickered, just for a second. But Grady saw it. The calculation, the concern. That's wonderful, honey, she said, voice warm. But her eyes were distant, already planning. They ate. Grady pushed his food around, occasionally taking small bites, making sure Christine saw him eating. When she got up to get dessert, he quickly swapped their wine glasses. Later, after she'd gone to bed, claiming exhaustion, he dumped his plate down the disposal and sent Vernon a text. She's rattled. It's working. The next morning, Christine was on her phone constantly. Grady pretended to sleep while she whispered urgently in the bathroom. We need to move it up? I don't care, figure out. No, I'm thinking 2 weeks, maybe less. That afternoon, Linda texted, Terrell just purchased a used car. Cash. Registered to a fake name. They're planning something. And that evening, Vernon called. Exhumation approved. Richard's body will be tested next week. Everything was falling into place. Grady stood in his study, looking at the chessboard he'd set up months ago, a game he played against himself on quiet evenings. He'd always loved chess. The patience, the strategy, the way a series of small moves could trap an opponent who thought they were winning. Christine thought she was 3 moves from checkmate. She didn't realize she'd been in Grady's trap for 2 weeks. And now it was time to spring it. Chapter 4. The Closing Net. The assembly was Tuesday morning. Roosevelt Goodwin stood at the podium in the packed gymnasium, hundreds of students and staff watching as he announced the historic grant. When he called Grady to the stage, the applause was genuine. His students cheered. His colleagues smiled. Christine sat in the back row, her smile plastic. Mr. Massey represents everything we value at Roosevelt High, the principal said, clapping Grady on the shoulder. Dedication, innovation, and a real commitment to our students' futures. This grant will fund field trips to historical sites, bring in guest speakers, and create a digital archive. And the school board has asked me to announce that due to Mr. Massey's increased value to our program, they're recommending additional benefits, including an enhanced insurance package. Grady saw Christine's face go pale. After the assembly, teachers congratulated him. Students high-fived him in the halls. But Grady's attention was on his phone, where Linda was texting real-time updates. Christine left immediately after assembly, meeting Terrell at usual spot. They're arguing. Terrell looks agitated. She's crying. He's on his phone. They just left separately. She's heading to a pharmacy. Grady's heart rate picked up. A pharmacy. She was buying something. Something to accelerate the timeline. He taught his afternoon classes on autopilot, his mind racing through scenarios. By the time he got home, he'd prepared himself for anything. Christine was in the kitchen again, baking. Chocolate chip cookies, his mother's recipe, one she'd only made twice in their entire marriage. Thought you'd want comfort food after your big day, she said, kissing his cheek. Her perfume was strong, probably to mask something. You're sweet. He watched her pull the cookies from the oven. They looked perfect. They smelled delicious. They were probably lethal. I have to run to the store, she said, untying her apron. Forgot milk. Eat while they're warm. I'll be back in 20 minutes. The moment her car pulled out, Grady moved. He photographed the cookies from every angle, then carefully placed 3 in evidence bags. The rest he fed to the garbage disposal. He replaced them with cookies from a package he'd hidden in his car. When Christine returned, she found him at the table, a half-eaten cookie on a plate. Good, she asked, watching him intently. Perfect, he smiled, just like Mom used to make. That night, he threw up dramatically, actually just water, but Christine didn't know that. She found him on the bathroom floor, pale and shaking. Oh God, Grady, this is worse. We need to get you to the hospital. No, he gasped. Just need rest. Probably that stomach bug going around school. Are you sure? Please. I hate hospitals. I'll be fine by morning. She hesitated, then nodded. But he saw the satisfaction in her eyes. She thought the increased dose was working. The next morning, Grady called in sick. Christine left for a work meeting, and Linda picked her up immediately. She's not going to work. She's meeting Terrell at the storage unit. Grady met Linda there. They watched from a distance as Christine and Terrell loaded 2 large duffel bags into Terrell's new car. What's in the bags? Grady asked. Linda snapped photos with a telephoto lens. If I had to guess, passports, cash, and their exit strategy. They're getting ready to run. Richard's results come back tomorrow, Grady said. Once we have proof he was murdered, this whole thing unravels. They might not wait that long. Your wife thinks you could die any day now. She's preparing to be the grieving widow who needs to get away to heal. Linda lowered her camera. You need to be careful. If they think you're onto them, they won't. Because tomorrow night, I'm going to give them exactly what they want. Grady explained his plan. Linda's eyes widened. That's insane. It'll work. You could actually die. Not if you're watching. He met her gaze. Trust me. I've got this. That evening, Grady called his sister Rochelle Cannon, who lived 3 states away. She was a nurse, sharp and practical. He'd already told her everything. Are you absolutely sure about this? She asked. I need her on record. I need proof she wants me dead, in her own words. Fine. I'm flying in tomorrow. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Just be ready. Thursday afternoon, Vernon called. Richard's results came back. Massive thallium poisoning. Levels consistent with months of exposure. The ME is recommending the case be reopened as homicide. How long until police move? Could be a few days. They're coordinating with the DA, gathering all evidence. Too long. We need to end this now. Grady's voice was firm. Tonight. Everything happens tonight. He went home and found Christine packing a suitcase. What's going on? He asked. She jumped. Oh, just organizing. My trip next week. You're going away again? Just for a few days. But honey, you look terrible. Maybe we should get you checked out. I'm really worried. Actually, I think you're right. I'll make an appointment tomorrow. He swayed, gripping the door frame. But tonight, let's just have a nice dinner. Together. Like old times. Her eyes lit up with something predatory. That sounds perfect. I'll cook. No. He smiled weakly. Let me order us something. Your favorite. That Italian place you love. He ordered delivery and made sure to intercept it before she could. While Christine showered, he plated the food and set the table. Hidden cameras recorded everything. When they sat down, Christine seemed almost giddy. To your success, she said, raising her wine glass. To us, Grady replied. He took a small sip and watched her drink deeply. They ate. They talked about his grant, her work, their future. All lies, all performance. But Grady was the better actor. As the evening wore on, he let his words slur slightly. He accidentally knocked over his water glass. He complained of dizziness. Maybe I should lie down, he said. Yes, absolutely. Christine helped him to the bedroom, her hands gentle. Murderous hands. Christine, he said, looking up at her, if anything happens to me, I just want you to know, you made me so happy. Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt? Regret? No, just satisfaction. Nothing's going to happen to you, she whispered. Just sleep. She kissed his forehead and left. Grady lay in the dark, listening. The moment he heard her bedroom door close, he got up and took the evidence bag from his nightstand, the cookie from 2 nights ago. Laboratory analysis had confirmed concentrated thallium sulfate, enough to kill him if he'd actually eaten it. He texted Linda. Ready? In position. Cameras rolling. Then he called 911. My wife is trying to kill me, he said calmly. I have evidence. She's poisoned me, and she's planning to flee tonight. I need police at my address immediately, and I need an ambulance. I'm going to pretend to be dying to get a confession. Chapter 5. The Long Con. Grady had spent weeks planning this moment. Every detail mattered. Every variable accounted for. He'd learned that from teaching, preparation was the difference between chaos and control. At 9:47 p.m., he began groaning loudly. Christine's door opened. Footsteps in the hall, quick and light. Grady? She appeared in his doorway, backlit from the hall. Are you okay? Can't breathe. He clutched his chest, thrashing on the bed. Something's wrong. She rushed over, but not to help. He saw her check his pulse, efficient and clinical. She wasn't panicking. She was checking if he was dying properly. Hold on, she said, pulling out her phone. But she didn't call 911. She texted someone. Terrell, probably. Please, Grady gasped. Help. You're going to be fine, she said, but her voice was distant. She was thinking, calculating. Just breathe. I'll get help. She left the room. Through the crack in the door, he heard her on the phone. It's happening. I don't know, maybe an hour? No, I'll call 911 in a few minutes, make it look good. Yes, I'm sure. Just be ready to pick me up tomorrow. Grady recorded every word on the device hidden in his shirt. Then he heard something else. A car door. 2 car doors. His heart raced, but not from the fake medical emergency. The police were early. Suddenly, the bedroom lights blazed on. Christine stood in the doorway, but her expression had changed. She looked confused, then terrified, as voices echoed from downstairs. Police! We have a warrant. Her eyes snapped to Grady, who sat up calmly, no longer gasping. What? She started. It's over, Christine, he said quietly. The color drained from her face. She bolted for the window, but 2 officers were already coming up the stairs. She turned back to Grady, eyes wild. You can't. There's no proof. There's all the proof in the world. Grady stood, steady and strong. Your laptop, your messages with Terrell, the storage unit, the thallium in my system and in those cookies you baked. Richard's exhumation showing the same poison. Video of you slipping things into my food. Audio of you planning my death. And let's not forget Stella Lester and Roy Gross. Christine's face crumpled. You weren't supposed to. You were weak, stupid, easy to manipulate. Grady's voice was ice. You underestimated me. They all do. The police entered the room. Christine Massey, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and suspicion of multiple homicides. As they cuffed her, she looked at Grady with something like disbelief. How long have you known? Since the day I took your laptop to Lionel. You got careless, Christine. Probably because you thought I was too boring to notice. Too in love to question. Too weak to fight back. You bastard, she spat. You let me think. You pretended. Yes, I did. Because that's what you did to me for 8 years. The difference is, I'm not a murderer. They let her downstairs. Grady followed, watching as they put her in the back of a police cruiser. Through the window, Christine stared at him, and for a moment he saw her as she really was, not beautiful or charming, just hollow. Mr. Massey? Detective Haywood Santos approached. He'd been part of the coordinated operation. We've arrested Terrell Munoz as well. Caught him trying to board a flight to Tijuana with fake documents and $80,000 in cash. What about the other victims? We're opening investigations into Richard Cobb, Stella Lester, and Roy Gross. With the evidence you provided, we're confident we can prove a pattern. Your wife and Mr. Munoz are looking at life sentences. Multiple life sentences. Grady nodded. Justice. Finally. For Richard, for Stella, for Roy. For all the lives Christine and Terrell had destroyed. Linda Hansen appeared at his side. You did good. Stupid but good. Thanks for having my back. That's what you pay me for. She smiled. Though for the record, I still think you're crazy for using yourself as bait. It had to be airtight. They had to incriminate themselves completely. He looked at the police cruiser. People like her always think they're the smartest in the room. They never consider that the boring teacher might be 3 steps ahead. Vernon McConnell arrived minutes later, and they spent the next 2 hours at the police station, giving statements, providing evidence, coordinating with prosecutors. By midnight, the case against Christine and Terrell was rock solid. When Grady finally left the station, he found his sister Rochelle waiting in the parking lot. You're an idiot, she said, hugging him hard. I know. She could have killed you. She tried. I'm just better at chess than she thought. Rochelle pulled back, studying his face. Are you okay? Really? Was he? His wife had tried to murder him. She'd never loved him, just seen him as a paycheck and a victim. 8 years of lies, manipulation, and slow death. But he'd won. He'd survived. And more importantly, he'd stopped her from killing anyone else. I'm getting there, he said honestly. Ask me again in a year. Fair enough. She linked her arm through his. Come on, you're staying at my hotel tonight. No arguments. As they drove away, Grady looked back at the police station one last time. Somewhere inside, Christine was realizing her perfect plan had crumbled, that her boring, weak husband had outplayed her completely. He smiled. It was grim satisfaction, but it was something. Tomorrow, he'd start to rebuild. Tonight, he'd won. Chapter 6, Unraveling Threads. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and revelations. The case against Christine Massey and Terrell Munoz grew stronger every day, and with it came a flood of information that painted an even darker picture than Grady had imagined. Richard Cobb's exhumed remains confirmed massive thallium poisoning. His family, who'd always suspected something was wrong, finally had answers. His sister called Grady personally to thank him. We knew, she said, voice breaking. We told the police something was off about Christine, but they said there was no evidence. Thank you for giving Richard justice. Stella Lester's case in Arizona was reopened. Terrell had been her personal trainer, and they'd been dating for 6 months before her sudden death. Her bank accounts had been empty days before she died. Terrell had been questioned but released due to lack of evidence. Roy Gross in Nevada. His hiking accident was being reinvestigated. He'd been a wealthy software developer who'd met Christine at a conference. They dated briefly. 3 weeks later, he fell from a cliff during a solo hike. Christine had been out of state at the time, but investigators now believed Terrell had done the physical work while Christine established her alibi. Then came a 4th victim, one Grady hadn't known about. Detective Santos called him on a Thursday morning. We found evidence of another one. Antone Knight, Florida, 7 years ago. Christine knew him from college. He died in a house fire. She was the beneficiary of a $100,000 policy. Jesus, Grady breathed. How many people did they kill? We're still digging, but it's looking like at least 4, possibly more. These two have been at this for nearly a decade. The story broke nationally. Teacher outsmarts Black Widow, killer wife, screamed one headline. Husband's brilliant trap catches serial killer couple, read another. Grady refused most interview requests. He didn't want fame, he wanted closure. But he did agree to one, a long-form piece by a true crime journalist named Leslie Lucas who'd covered the Richard Cobb case years ago. What made you realize you could catch them? Leslie asked during the interview. Grady thought carefully. I teach history. I spend every day explaining how empires fall, how the powerful make mistakes, how arrogance leads to destruction. Christine and Terrell thought they were invincible because they'd gotten away with it before. But the pattern was always there. They just needed someone to see it and be patient enough to prove it. Were you afraid? Every day. But I was angrier than I was afraid. These people destroyed lives without remorse. I couldn't let them do it again. What happens now? Now, I heal, I rebuild, and I make sure they never get the chance to hurt anyone else. The trial was set for 3 months out. Both Christine and Terrell faced multiple counts of murder and attempted murder across 4 states. Their lawyers tried to negotiate plea deals, but prosecutors weren't interested. The evidence was overwhelming. Christine's family reached out, her mother sobbing, apologizing, claiming she'd never known. Grady wasn't sure if he believed her, but he accepted the apology with grace. Some burdens weren't his to carry. Meanwhile, Grady's life slowly returned to something resembling normal. He went back to teaching. His students, at first awkward and unsure how to act around him, eventually relaxed when they realized he was still the same Mr. Massey, maybe a little quieter, maybe a little sharper, but fundamentally unchanged. Lionel Hoover stopped by his classroom one afternoon, closing the door behind him. "How are you holding up?" Lionel asked. "Better than expected." Grady gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I owe you everything, you know. If you hadn't found those files, you would have found them eventually. You're too smart not to have noticed something. Maybe, but you gave me time. Time to plan, time to build the case. You saved my life." Lionel nodded. "What you did was risky, but it was also brilliant. You didn't just save yourself. You got justice for people who'd been forgotten." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lionel said, "Frida and I are having dinner this weekend. You should come. No talk about the case, no heavy conversations. Just food and bad jokes." Grady smiled. "I'd like that." That weekend, surrounded by friends who'd supported him through the darkest time of his life, Grady felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not complete, not perfect, but real. On Monday, Vernon McConnell called with an update. The prosecution is confident. They're going for 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and multiple conspiracy charges. Christine and Terrell are looking at life without parole, possibly multiple consecutive life sentences. "Good," Grady said simply. "There's something else. Roy Gross's sister wants to meet you. She's been fighting for years to prove her brother's death wasn't an accident. She says you gave her hope." Grady agreed. The next week, he met Kelly Russell at a coffee shop. She was in her 40s, fierce eyes, and a determined jaw. "My brother was one of the smartest people I knew," she said. "Everyone said he just made a stupid mistake hiking alone. But Roy was careful. He'd hiked that trail a dozen times. I knew something was wrong." "I'm sorry for your loss," Grady said. "I'm sorry for yours. The difference is, yours didn't die." Kelly's voice hardened. "You stopped them. You made sure they'd pay. That takes strength most people don't have. Your brother deserved justice. They all did. Thank you." Kelly reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being smarter than they were." As Grady left the coffee shop, he realized something. He wasn't just surviving. He was rebuilding. And from the ashes of betrayal and murder, he was creating something stronger. The trial would come. Christine and Terrell would face the consequences of their actions. And Grady would be there, not as a victim, but as the man who'd refused to let evil win. He'd played the long game, and he'd won. Chapter 7. The Trial of Monsters. The courthouse in downtown was built like a fortress, gray stone, tall columns, and security checkpoints that reminded everyone justice was serious business. On the first day of the trial, news vans lined the street, reporters jostled for position, and curious onlookers filled every available seat. Grady sat in the front row of the gallery, flanked by Vernon McConnell and Linda Hansen. Across the aisle, families of the other victims gathered. Richard Cobb's sister, Stella Lester's parents, Roy Gross's sister Kelly, and representatives from Antone Knight's family. When Christine Massey was led into the courtroom, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. She looked smaller somehow, diminished in her orange jumpsuit, dark circles under her eyes. Gone was the polished pharmaceutical saleswoman. This was the real Christine, the predator who'd worn a pretty mask. Terrell Munoz followed, hulking and sullen, his jaws set in defiance. He glared at Grady, who met his gaze without flinching. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Hilton Howell, a veteran prosecutor known for never losing a murder case. He was methodical, precise, and utterly relentless. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Howell began in his opening statement. This is a case about greed, about murder, and about two people who believe they were too smart to get caught. Over the span of nearly a decade, Christine Massey and Terrell Munoz killed at least 4 people, possibly more. They poisoned, they staged accidents, they destroyed families. And they did it for money. Cold, calculated, premeditated murder. For insurance payouts, for bank accounts, for the thrill of getting away with it. He paused, letting his words sink in. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated Grady Massey, a high school history teacher who refused to be their next victim. Instead, Mr. Massey did what law enforcement couldn't. He gathered evidence, built an airtight case, and stopped these killers in their tracks. This trial will show you exactly how Christine Massey and Terrell Munoz committed their crimes. And it will show you why they must never be free again. Christine's lawyer, a slick defense attorney named Isaiah Cannon, tried a different approach. The prosecution wants you to believe my client is some kind of mastermind serial killer, he said, pacing before the jury. But where's the proof? Digital messages that could be fabricated? Circumstantial evidence? My client is a successful businesswoman who made the mistake of having a relationship with the wrong man. Terrell Munoz, the real criminal here. Christine Massey is a victim herself, manipulated by a dangerous man who convinced her to go along with his schemes. It was a desperate strategy. Throw Terrell under the bus and hope the jury bought that Christine was just a pawn. But Grady knew it wouldn't work. The evidence was too strong. Over the next 2 weeks, the prosecution presented a devastating case. Dr. Eddie Kirk, the forensic pathologist who'd examined Richard Cobb's remains, testified about the massive levels of thallium found in his system. This wasn't accidental exposure. This was systematic poisoning over months. Lionel Hoover, the IT specialist, explained how he discovered the incriminating messages on Christine's laptop. The conversations were detailed, methodical. They discussed dosages, timelines, and how to avoid detection. This was clearly planned. Linda Hansen presented surveillance footage showing Christine and Terrell meeting repeatedly, transferring cash, and loading duffel bags into cars. They were preparing to flee the country the day they were arrested. Vernon McConnell read aloud the messages between Christine and Terrell, their cold calculation chilling the courtroom. Richard was too easy. We need to be smarter with the next one. Grady is perfect, quiet, trusting, no family nearby. And the policy is bigger. I'm bored already. How much longer? Patience, baby. The longer we wait, the cleaner it looks. The jury looked horrified. Several wiped tears from their eyes. Then came Grady's testimony. He took the stand calmly, dressed in a simple suit, looking every bit the unassuming teacher Christine had underestimated. Howell walked him through the entire story. The laptop discovery, the shock of learning his wife was poisoning him, the decision to build a case rather than run. Why didn't you just go to the police immediately? Howell asked. Because I knew they'd need more than digital evidence. I'd seen how these cases fall apart when it's just one person's word against another's. I needed Christine and Terrell to incriminate themselves beyond any doubt. I needed to make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else ever again. Were you afraid? Every single day. But fear is temporary. Letting them kill me and move on to their next victim? That would have been unforgivable. Isaiah Cannon cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint Grady as vindictive, manipulative, someone who'd set up his wife. Isn't it true, Mr. Massey, that you were unhappy in your marriage? No, I love my wife, or who I thought she was. Isn't it true you stood to benefit from these allegations? Media attention, book deals. I've refused every book deal and most media requests. I don't want attention. I want justice. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted innocent messages? That you saw what you wanted to see? Grady looked at the jury, then back at Cannon. There's nothing innocent about researching how to poison someone. There's nothing innocent about messages saying 2 more months until he's dead. There's nothing innocent about fleeing the country with fake passports. My wife tried to kill me. That's not interpretation. That's fact. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge gavelled for order, but the point was made. Chapter 8. The Weight of Truth. The most powerful testimony came from the victims' families. Richard Cobb's sister, Ginger Simpson, took the stand with a box of tissues. I knew something was wrong. Richard called me 2 weeks before he died and said he felt like he was losing his mind. Headaches, fatigue, paranoia. I told him to see a doctor. He said Christine was taking good care of him. Her voice broke. She killed him while pretending to love him, just like she did to Grady. Stella Lester's mother, Darlene Sutton, sobbed through her testimony. My daughter was healthy, vibrant, only 31. Then she met that man. She pointed at Terrell. 6 months later, she was dead. Heart condition, they said. My Stella never had heart problems. Never. And her money was gone. All of it. Roy Gross's sister Kelly testified about her years of fighting to prove her brother's death wasn't an accident. Roy was an expert hiker. The idea that he just fell is absurd. But no one would listen. Until Mr. Massey proved there was a pattern. The evidence against Terrell Munoz was equally damning. The prosecution presented his financial records showing large deposits after each victim's death. They showed his purchase of fake IDs, his research into poisons and accidents, his history of violence. A former cellmate testified that Terrell had bragged about pulling off the perfect crimes and using women to do the dirty work while he stayed clean. Terrell's lawyer, a public defender named Abdul Maldonado, tried to argue his client was just Christine's lackey, following orders. But the evidence showed Terrell was an active, willing participant, possibly even the mastermind. The final piece of evidence was the cookies, the ones Christine had baked for Grady with enough thallium to kill him. Dr. Eddie Kirk testified about the toxicology. If Mr. Massey had eaten even one of these cookies, he would likely be dead within hours. This was not a gradual poisoning attempt. This was attempted murder with a massive, lethal dose. Christine's face went white. Terrell stared at the table. After 3 weeks of testimony, closing arguments began. Hilton Howell addressed the jury one final time. You've heard the evidence. You've seen the messages, the surveillance, the forensics. Christine Massey and Terrell Munoz are serial killers who murdered at least 4 people and attempted to murder a 5th. They showed no remorse, no hesitation, no humanity. They destroyed families for money. They planned, they executed, they tried to flee. The only reason they're sitting in this courtroom instead of enjoying their blood money in Mexico is because one man, Grady Massey, was smart enough, brave enough, and determined enough to stop them. Do your duty. Find them guilty on all counts. Make sure they never harm anyone again. Isaiah Cannon made his final appeal. Yes, Christine made terrible choices. Yes, she was involved with a dangerous man. But she is not the monster the prosecution describes. She's a woman who got caught up in something she didn't fully understand, manipulated by Terrell Munoz. Show mercy. Consider the possibility that she's a victim too. It rang hollow. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Guilty, on all counts, for both defendants. Christine collapsed, sobbing. Terrell's face hardened into a mask of rage. The courtroom erupted. Families of victims hugging, crying, finally getting the justice they'd fought for. Grady sat quietly, feeling the weight of it all. Relief, grief, exhaustion, and something like peace. Chapter 9. Phoenix Rising. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman named Barbara Weiss, reviewed the case with clinical precision. Then she addressed the defendants. Christine Massey, Terrell Munoz, you have been found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, along with multiple conspiracy charges. The evidence presented in this case is among the most disturbing I've encountered in 30 years on the bench. You killed people who trusted you, loved you, believed in you. You destroyed families. You did it for money, and you showed no remorse. She paused, letting the words settle. This court sentences you, Christine Massey, to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years for attempted murder. You will die in prison, Christine wailed. Her mother, sitting in the back, covered her face. Terrell Munoz, you receive the same, for consecutive life sentences without parole, plus 25 years. You will never walk free again. Terrell finally showed emotion. His face crumpled, and he slumped in his chair. Bailiff, remove the defendants. As they were led away, Christine looked back at Grady one last time. He met her gaze without anger, without satisfaction, just finality. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Grady declined to make statement. He simply stood with the families of the other victims, united in their grief and relief. Kelly Russell hugged him. Thank you. You gave us closure. Ginger Simpson squeezed his hand. Richard would be grateful. We all are. Vernon McConnell clapped him on the shoulder. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Grady corrected. All of us. That night, Grady sat alone in his house. The house he'd shared with the killer. The house where he'd almost died. It felt different now. Lighter. Like exorcising a ghost. His phone rang. It was Roosevelt Goodwin, his principal. Grady, just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? Better than expected. Tired, but better. Good. Because I have a proposition. The school board wants to create a new program. A course on critical thinking, evidence analysis, and practical logic. They want you to design and teach it. Grady smiled. Based on recent events? Let's call it inspired by. You showed everyone what careful observation and strategic thinking can accomplish. We think students should learn those skills. I'd be honored. 3 months later, Grady stood in front of a new class. Critical analysis and strategic thinking was written on the board behind him. This course, he began, is about patterns. How to see them, how to analyze them, how to respond to them. It's about not accepting things at face value. It's about asking questions, gathering evidence, and thinking 3 steps ahead. The students watched him intently. Some of you know my story. You know what happened to me. But this class isn't about revenge or vigilante justice. It's about the power of observation, the importance of evidence, and the value of patience. Because the truth always emerges if you're smart enough and patient enough to uncover it. One student raised her hand. Mr. Massey, were you scared? Every day, he answered honestly. But fear is just information. It tells you something is wrong. What matters is what you do with that information. Do you regret it? Playing the long game instead of just running. Grady thought for a moment. If I'd run, Christine and Terrell would have found another victim. Someone else would have died. So no, I don't regret it. I'm proud that I had the strength to stop them. The class nodded, absorbing his words. That afternoon, Grady received an unexpected visitor. Lionel Hoover, carrying a gift-wrapped box. What's this? Grady asked. Open it. Inside was a beautiful chess set, the pieces carved from dark and light wood. You're a hell of a chess player, Lionel said. You saw the board, planned your moves, and executed perfectly. Thought you deserved a proper set. Grady smiled, genuinely touched. Thank you. And there's something else. Lionel pulled out an envelope. Richard Cobb's family asked me to give you this. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a letter. Mr. Massey, we received Richard's life insurance payout, which Christine never touched before her arrest. We want you to have some of it. You gave us justice when no one else would. You honored Richard's memory. Please use this to rebuild your life to find happiness again. You've earned it. The Cobb family. Grady's eyes stung with tears. I can't accept this. You can, and you will. They insisted. So did Stella's family and Roy's sister. They all contributed. Consider it a thank you for stopping serial killers' fund. Lionel, take it. You got a second chance at life. Build something beautiful with it. That weekend, Grady used part of the money to take a trip, the first real vacation he'd had in years. He visited national parks, historical sites, places he'd only taught about but never seen. He breathed fresh air, watched sunsets, and slowly, carefully began to heal. 6 months after the trial, he received a letter from Christine. It had been screened by prison officials, and Vernon had advised him not to read it. But curiosity won. Grady, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know something. I did love you. Maybe not the way I should have, maybe not enough to stop. But there were moments when I wished I could be the person you thought I was. You were always too good for me. Too kind, too trusting, too decent. That's why you were the perfect target. But it's also why you won. You're a better person than I could ever be. I hope you find happiness. Real happiness with someone who deserves you. I'm sorry. Christine. Grady read it twice, then filed it away. He didn't respond. Some doors needed to stay closed. A year after the trial, Grady attended a support group for people who'd survived domestic violence and attempted murder. He met others who'd faced similar betrayals, and he shared his story. The hardest part, he told the group, wasn't the fear or the danger. It was accepting that the person I loved never really existed. Christine was always a predator. I just couldn't see it. A woman nodded. How did you move past that? By realizing it wasn't my fault. I trusted someone I shouldn't have, but that doesn't make me stupid or weak. It makes me human. And I survived. I fought back. I won. That's what matters. The group applauded softly. 18 months after the trial, Grady met someone new. Her name was Anna Blackwell, a librarian at Roosevelt High who'd recently transferred from another district. She was quiet, kind, and had a dry sense of humor that made him laugh. They started with coffee, then dinners, then long walks discussing books and history in life. She knew his story. Everyone did. But she saw him as Grady, not as the teacher who caught the Black Widow killer. I'm not looking for a hero, she said one evening. I'm looking for someone genuine. And you're the most genuine person I've met. I've got baggage, Grady warned. We all do. Yours just made national news. She smiled. I can handle it if you can. 2 years after the trial, Grady stood in front of his class, teaching a lesson on resilience through history. Students filled the room, engaged and curious. After class, one student lingered. Mr. Massey, I just want to say, you inspired me. To be smarter, to pay attention, to not let people take advantage of me. Grady smiled. That's the greatest compliment you could give me. You're kind of a legend, you know. I'm just a teacher who got lucky. No, the student said firmly. You're a teacher who refused to be a victim. That's different. That evening, Grady sat on his porch, a new house in a new neighborhood, far from the memories of Christine. Anna sat beside him, reading a book. The chess set Lionel had given him sat on a small table, a game in progress. His phone buzzed. A news alert. Christine Massey and Terrell Munoz linked to sixth victim. Investigation ongoing. Grady read it, then put the phone away. That chapter of his life was closed. Justice had been served. The monsters were caged. He'd played the long game, and he'd won. Not just survival, but a second chance at life. A real life built on truth and strength and hard-earned wisdom. He looked at Anna, who glanced up and smiled. Penny for your thoughts? She asked. Just grateful, he said simply. For second chances. For justice. For this. She took his hand. Me too. As the sun set, Grady felt something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine peace. The kind that comes from facing darkness and emerging stronger. From being underestimated and proving everyone wrong. From refusing to be a victim. Christine and Terrell were in prison, where they'd spend the rest of their lives. For families at closure. And Grady Massey, the unassuming history teacher they tried to kill, had built a new life from the ashes of their betrayal. He'd won, not with violence or vengeance, but with intelligence, patience, and unwavering determination. And that, he thought as Anna squeezed his hand, was the best victory of all. Epilogue. 5 years later, Grady published a book, The Long Game: How Patience, Evidence, and Strategy Saved My Life. The proceeds went to organizations supporting victims of domestic violence and helping families reopen cold cases. Christine and Terrell remained in prison. Additional investigations linked them to 2 more deaths, though those cases were harder to prove. They never spoke to each other again. Grady married Anna in a small ceremony surrounded by friends and family. They honored the memory of Christine's victims by establishing a scholarship fund in their names. And every semester, Grady taught his critical thinking class, inspiring a new generation of students to question, analyze, and never accept things at face value. He'd turned his darkest chapter into his greatest lesson, and he'd never played a game of chess without thinking about the day he checkmated a killer. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Homecoming. The Denver International Airport hummed with its usual chaos as Master Sergeant Ryan Mitchell stepped off the military transport, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. 3 months in classified operations across Eastern Europe had aged him, adding new lines around his steel-gray eyes and a slight limp from shrapnel that had found its mark in Ukraine. At 38, Ryan carried himself with the controlled precision of a man who'd spent 15 years in Army Special Operations, someone who'd learned that survival meant never showing weakness. His phone buzzed as he cleared security. Victoria's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment, his weathered face softened. 3 months away from his wife of 16 years, away from their twins Emma and Dylan, now 15. The deployment had been brutal, but the thought of home had kept him going through the worst of it. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, beautiful. Just landed. I'll grab a cab and stay there." Victoria's voice was cold, clinical, not the warm greeting he'd expected. "I packed your bags and took all the money. It's over. Kids chose boarding school over you." Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. Around him, travelers hurried past, but everything seemed to slow, the familiar sensation he'd felt in combat when bullets started flying. His training kicked in: assess, analyze, adapt. But this wasn't enemy fire. This was his wife of 16 years delivering a calculated execution. "Vicky, what are you?" "Don't. Just don't. Tyler's here with me. We've been planning this for months. The house is sold, the accounts are emptied, and the kids want nothing to do with you. You were never here anyway." Tyler. The name hit him like a gut punch. Tyler Brooks, the personal trainer Victoria had hired 8 months ago. The pretty boy with the artificial smile who'd somehow wormed his way into his home while Ryan was serving his country. Where are Emma and Dylan? Safe. Away from you. They know what kind of father you really are: absent, controlling, emotionally unavailable. They chose to go to Westfield Academy rather than live with you. Westfield Academy, the elite boarding school that costs $60,000 a year. Money that should have been in their joint accounts. Money that represented years of combat pay and hazard bonuses. Ryan's voice remained steady, though inside, something cold and calculating was awakening. "I see. That's it? That's all you have to say?" He looked around the busy terminal, at families reuniting, at normal people living normal lives. But Ryan Mitchell wasn't normal people. He was a man trained to infiltrate, to destroy, to eliminate threats with surgical precision. And he'd just been given a new mission parameters. "As you wish," he said quietly. Victoria must have expected anger, threats, pleading. The calm acceptance in his voice seemed to unnerve her. "Ryan, this is better for everyone. You can start over, find someone who..." He hung up. For several minutes, Ryan stood motionless in the middle of the terminal, his mind processing the situation with the same methodical approach he'd used to plan operations in hostile territory. Victoria had made one critical error in her calculations. She'd assumed she was dealing with a man who'd left 3 months ago, a devoted husband and father who'd trusted completely, who'd never questioned her sudden interest in fitness or the new clothes, or the way she'd become secretive with her phone. But the man standing in the airport wasn't that man anymore. 3 months of black operations had stripped away whatever softness remained in Ryan Mitchell. He'd killed 11 enemy combatants with his bare hands, had extracted intelligence through methods that would make most people sick, had learned that mercy was a luxury that got good men killed. Ryan pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a name most people would find unremarkable: Danny's Pizza, Chicago. It wasn't a pizza place. Danny Torino was an old teammate from Delta Force who transitioned into private security consultation, the kind of work that didn't appear on tax returns and dealt with problems that couldn't be solved through legal channels. He placed a call. "You're early," Danny's gravelly voice answered. "Thought you weren't due back for another week. Change of plans. I need a favor." "Name it." "Everything on Victoria Mitchell, formerly Victoria Kendall, and Tyler Brooks, personal trainer, works out of Elite Fitness in Cherry Creek. I want backgrounds, financial records, daily routines, weaknesses, pressure points. Everything." A pause. "This sounds personal." "It is." "Budget." Ryan thought about the emptied accounts, the sold house, the children who'd been turned against him. "No limit." "Jesus, Ryan. What happened?" "My wife decided to declare war on the wrong man." After ending the call, Ryan made his way to the rental car counter. The perky blonde clerk smiled at him with practiced customer service enthusiasm. "Welcome to Denver. Are you here for business or pleasure?" Ryan's smile was cold, predatory. "Business." As he drove through the familiar streets of Denver toward what had been his home, Ryan began planning. Victoria thought she'd checkmated him, but she'd made the fundamental error of underestimating her opponent. She'd seen a soldier, a provider, a man who'd trusted her completely. She hadn't seen the predator. Ryan Mitchell had spent 15 years learning how to dismantle lives, how to find pressure points and exploit them, how to turn people's strengths into weaknesses. He'd toppled governments, eliminated high-value targets, and broken men who'd thought they were untouchable. And Victoria had just given him a new target. The house, his house, the one they bought when the twins were born, sat empty in the driveway. A sold sign decorated the front yard like a declaration of victory. But as Ryan sat in the rental car, studying the property he'd paid for with 15 years of military service, he wasn't thinking about loss. He was thinking about war. Chapter 2. Intelligence Gathering. The Marriott downtown wasn't where Ryan had expected to spend his first night back, but it would serve as a temporary command center. He'd checked in under an alias, a habit that would serve him well in the coming weeks. The room was Spartan, functional, exactly what he needed. Danny's first data package arrived at 0200 hours, delivered through encrypted channels that would make NSA cryptographers proud. Ryan spread the printouts across the hotel room's desk like a general planning an invasion. Victoria Kendall Mitchell, 36, born in Phoenix to middle-class parents. College dropout after 2 years studying art therapy. Met Ryan at a USO event in Colorado Springs when he was stationed at Fort Carson. Classic military wife trajectory. Married young. Followed him through 3 bases before settling in Denver when he transferred to special operations. But the interesting details were in the recent months. Credit card records showed a pattern of expensive purchases, designer clothes, jewelry, high-end restaurants. Always with Tyler Brooks. The affair had been going on for 10 months. Not 8 as Ryan had calculated. Tyler Brooks was even more interesting. 28, former minor league baseball player who'd washed out due to a cocaine habit he'd apparently beaten. Personal trainer for 3 years, specializing in lifestyle transformation for wealthy housewives. 2 DUIs, 1 domestic violence charge that had been dropped, and a bankruptcy filing from 2 years ago. Most interesting of all, Tyler had a gambling problem that he thought he'd hidden. Owed $47,000 to a bookie named Sal Torino, Danny's cousin who operated out of Vegas. Ryan's phone buzzed. Danny, you see the connection? I see it. How quickly can your cousin apply pressure? He's been wanting to send a message anyway. Brooks has been ducking payments for 6 weeks. But Ryan, you sure about this? Once this ball starts rolling, I'm sure. What's the end game here? Ryan looked at the photos Danny had included Victoria and Tyler at expensive restaurants, laughing, holding hands, playing house with money Ryan had bled for. Complete destruction. I want them to lose everything, trust no one, and understand exactly who they chose to cross. And the kids, they made their choice. Ryan's voice carried no emotion, but inside, something twisted. Emma and Dylan's betrayal cut deeper than Victoria's. He'd changed diapers, taught them to ride bikes, helped with homework through video calls from combat zones. But they'd chosen boarding school over him, chosen a life funded by his sacrifice but without his presence. No forgiveness. Not for traitors. The next morning, Ryan began his reconnaissance. Elite Fitness sat in an upscale shopping center in Cherry Creek, all glass and chrome, and beautiful people working on their beautiful bodies. He parked across the street with a clear view of the entrance and settled in to observe. Tyler appeared at 8:15 a.m., driving a red BMW that was worth more than most people's annual salary. Interesting, considering the bankruptcy filing and the gambling debts. Ryan noted the license plate, the parking spot Tyler preferred, the casual way he surveyed the lot before entering. The habits of a man who thought he was clever. Victoria arrived at 10:30 a.m. for what appeared to be a regular session. Ryan watched through binoculars as she and Tyler embraced in the parking lot, Tyler's hands lingering on her body with the familiarity of ownership. She was wearing new workout clothes, expensive brands that Ryan's deployment pay had funded. They were so confident, so comfortable in their betrayal. They thought they'd won. Ryan's phone vibrated with a text from Danny. Package delivered to Vegas. Sal's boys are en route. Phase 1 was beginning. At 11:45 a.m., Ryan called Westfield Academy. The receptionist was helpful. Wealthy parents paid for excellent customer service. I'd like to confirm enrollment for Emma and Dylan Mitchell, he said, using his command voice. Their mother handled the arrangements, but I want to ensure everything's in order. Of course, Mr. Mitchell. Yes, they're both enrolled for the fall semester. Full tuition was paid in advance. $96,000 for both children. $96,000. Money from the accounts Victoria had emptied. Money he'd earned dodging bullets in Ukraine. And the contact information on file? Victoria Mitchell and Tyler Brooks as emergency contacts. Should we add your information as well? Ryan paused. Tyler Brooks was listed as an emergency contact for his children. The man who'd stolen his wife was now positioned as a parental figure for Emma and Dylan. That won't be necessary, Ryan said quietly. Thank you. After hanging up, Ryan sat in the rental car, staring at the fitness center where his wife was probably letting her lover's hands roam over the body that had once belonged to him. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of trust, 15 years of building a life together, reduced to a financial transaction and a custody arrangement that painted him as the outsider. But Victoria had forgotten something crucial about the man she'd married. Ryan Mitchell didn't lose. He'd never lost a mission, never failed to eliminate a target, never left an enemy standing. And he wasn't about to start now. His phone rang. Unknown number. Daddy. Emma's voice hit him like shrapnel. His 15-year-old daughter, the little girl who used to wait by the window for him to come home, who'd cried when he deployed, who'd sent him care packages filled with homemade cookies and drawings. Emma. Sweetheart, where are you? At the academy. Daddy, I'm sorry. Mom said, she said you were dangerous, that you'd changed, that being around you wasn't safe for us anymore. She said the war made you different. Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. Victoria had used his service, his sacrifice, as a weapon against him. She turned his children into casualties of her betrayal. What do you think, Emma? Do you think I'm dangerous? A long pause. I don't know anymore. Tyler says soldiers come back broken, that you might hurt us without meaning to, and you've been gone so much, and when you are home, you're always so controlled, like you're not really there. And Dylan? He feels the same way. Yeah, we talked about it. We thought maybe if we went to school, it would give you time to get better, to get help. Ryan closed his eyes. They weren't betrayers. They were children who'd been manipulated by experts, a mother who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, and a predator who specialized in psychological manipulation. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your mother and Tyler lied to you. About me, about why I've been away, about everything. But I need you to stay where you are for now. Can you do that? Daddy, are you okay? You sound different. I'm going to fix this. All of it. But I need you and Dylan to trust me one more time. Stay at the academy, don't talk to Tyler or your mother about this conversation, and wait for me to contact you again. Are you coming to get us? Ryan looked across the street at the fitness center, where his wife was building a new life on the ashes of their marriage. Yes, but first, I have some business to take care of. After Emma hung up, Ryan sat in silence, processing this new intelligence. The children weren't enemies. They were prisoners of war, held by enemy combatants who'd used psychological warfare against them. That changed the mission parameters slightly, but not the ultimate objective. Victoria and Tyler still had to pay. Chapter 3, The First Strike. The call came at 3:17 a.m., 3 days after Ryan's conversation with Emma. He answered on the first ring, fully awake, a habit that had kept him alive through multiple deployments. It's done. Danny's voice carried a note of dark satisfaction. Sal's boys found Brooks at an underground poker game in Commerce City. Seems he was trying to win back what he owed, doubled down instead. Now he's in for $93,000. And Sal's boys can be very persuasive. Brooks has 72 hours to pay in full, or they start collecting interest in ways that'll affect his pretty boy looks. Ryan smiled in the darkness of his hotel room. What about the other thing? Your lawyer friend came through. Turns out Victoria filed for divorce 3 weeks ago, claiming abandonment and irreconcilable differences. She's asking for alimony, child support, and half of everything, including your military pension. The audacity was breathtaking. Victoria had planned this operation with military precision, probably with Tyler whispering strategies in her ear during their late-night planning sessions. But like most amateurs, they'd made critical errors. She doesn't know about the overseas accounts. Not yet, but her lawyer will find them eventually. No, he won't. Ryan's voice carried the cold certainty of a man who'd spent years hiding assets in countries that didn't cooperate with U.S. financial investigations. What else? Brooks is panicking. He's been calling Victoria every hour since Sal's boys visited. Apparently, he's been lying to her about his finances. She thinks he's wealthy. Perfect. Ryan had always believed that the best way to destroy an enemy was to turn their own weapons against them. Victoria and Tyler's relationship was built on lies, greed, and mutual manipulation. All Ryan had to do was apply pressure in the right places and watch them tear each other apart. The next morning, Ryan positioned himself at a coffee shop across from Elite Fitness, watching Tyler's increasingly erratic behavior. The pretty boy was sweating despite the air conditioning, checking his phone constantly, jumping every time the door chimed. Fear was a beautiful thing to watch in an enemy. At 11:30 a.m., Victoria arrived for her regular session. Ryan observed through high-powered binoculars as Tyler immediately cornered her in the parking lot. Even from a distance, it was clear the conversation was heated. Victoria's body language shifted from confused to angry to alarmed as Tyler spoke. Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from a burner number. Need $93K. Emergency. Can't explain over phone. Meet me at our place at 2. The text hadn't been sent to Ryan. Danny's tech specialist had cloned Tyler's phone and was now monitoring all communications. Victoria would receive that message in exactly 30 seconds. Her response came quickly. What? Why? We agreed, no secrets. Tyler's reply. Life or death situation. Trust me. Bring checkbook. Ryan watched Victoria storm into the fitness center, her perfect world beginning to crack at the edges. Tyler followed, his swagger replaced by the desperate movements of a cornered animal. Phase 2 was about to begin. At 2 p.m., Ryan followed Victoria to their place, a luxury apartment Tyler had rented in her name 6 weeks ago. Another financial obligation she'd taken on without realizing the trap being built around her. Danny's intelligence had revealed that Tyler had been planning to leave Denver with Victoria's money all along, but the gambling debt had accelerated his timeline. Ryan parked 3 blocks away and used surveillance equipment to monitor the apartment. The argument that erupted was spectacular. $93,000? Victoria's voice carried through the thin walls. Are you insane? That's almost everything I have left. Baby, you don't understand. These people will kill me if I don't pay. What people? You told me you had money. You told me you were successful. I am successful. This is just a temporary setback. Once your divorce is final, we'll have millions from your husband's military benefits. My husband doesn't have millions. He does. I've seen the paperwork. Military contractors make serious money, and he's been deployed for years. Trust me, baby. I know what I'm doing. Ryan smiled grimly. Tyler had been feeding Victoria lies about his financial situation, just as he'd been lying about Ryan's. The con man was being conned by his own greed. I'm not giving you $93,000 for gambling debts. It's not gambling debts. It's an investment opportunity that went bad. You're lying. God, you're actually lying to me right now. The sound of glass breaking echoed from the apartment. Victoria was learning what Ryan had known for months, that Tyler Brooks was a predator who specialized in manipulation. The difference was that Ryan had never trusted him. His phone buzzed with another intercepted text, this one from Victoria to her sister in Phoenix. I think I made a terrible mistake. Call me. By 4 p.m., Victoria had stormed out of the apartment, leaving Tyler alone with his panic and his debts. Ryan followed her home, to the house that should have been his home, and watched her pace the living room through the windows, cell phone pressed to her ear. That evening, Ryan received a call from his daughter Emma. Daddy? Something weird happened today. Tyler came to the school to pick up some papers Mom asked him to get from our admissions file. But when the office called to confirm, Mom said she never asked him to do that. What kind of papers? Financial stuff. Bank statements, the tuition payment records. The office wouldn't give them to him, but he seemed really upset. Tyler was making moves, trying to access information about Victoria's remaining money. The pressure was working exactly as Ryan had planned. Emma, I need you to do something for me. Don't trust Tyler Brooks. If he contacts you or Dylan for any reason, don't talk to him. Can you do that? Mom says we're supposed to treat him like family. Your mother is wrong about Tyler. She's going to figure that out soon, but I need you and Dylan to be careful until she does. Daddy, are you and Mom really getting divorced? Ryan looked out his hotel window at the Denver skyline, at the city where he'd thought he'd build a life with a woman he'd loved since he was 22. Yes, sweetheart, we are. Because of Tyler? Because your mother chose someone else over our family. I'm sorry, Daddy. I should have seen it. Dylan and I should have known. You're children. It's not your job to protect your parents from their own choices. But I promise you this. When this is over, you'll understand exactly who your mother really is and why Daddy had to fix things. After hanging up, Ryan reviewed Danny's latest intelligence report. Tyler had maxed out 2 credit cards trying to make a partial payment to Sal Torino. Victoria had transferred $60,000 to a separate account, insurance money she was hiding from Tyler. And both of them were starting to realize that their perfect plan was collapsing. But Ryan wasn't done. Not even close. The real war was just beginning. Chapter 4, Pressure Points. Sal Torino's boys found Tyler Brooks at 6:23 a.m., leaving his apartment building for what he'd thought was a discreet morning jog. They were professionals. No unnecessary violence. Just a clear message delivered with surgical precision. By 6:45 a.m., Tyler was sitting in his BMW with a dislocated shoulder and the understanding that his 72 hours had become 24 hours. Ryan watched the encounter from a rooftop position 2 blocks away, using military-grade surveillance equipment. Tyler's face went through the entire spectrum of fear as the reality of his situation crystallized. He wasn't dealing with some abstract threat anymore. These were serious people who solved problems with creative applications of pain. The beauty of using Tyler's existing debts was that Ryan's fingerprints were nowhere on the escalation. Sal Torino was simply collecting money legitimately owed to him. The fact that this collection happened to coincide with Ryan's timeline was just fortunate timing. Tyler's first call was to Victoria. Ryan monitored the conversation through the clone phone network Danny had established. Baby, I need that money now. Not next week, not tomorrow. Today. Tyler, you sound different. Are you hurt? I'm fine, but I won't be if I don't get $93,000 by tonight. That's impossible. The banks aren't even open yet, and I don't have access to that much cash immediately. Then get access. Liquidate something, call your lawyer. I don't care what you have to do. Victoria's voice shifted from concern to suspicion. Why didn't you tell me about this before? We've been planning our future together for months, and you never mentioned owing money to dangerous people. It's complicated. No, it's not complicated. You lied to me, just like you probably lied about having money of your own. The line went quiet for several seconds. Ryan could practically hear Tyler's mind racing, trying to find an angle that would save him. Victoria, listen to me. If I don't pay these people, they won't just hurt me. They'll hurt anyone connected to me. That includes you. It was a masterful manipulation, using Victoria's fear to override her growing suspicions. But Ryan had anticipated this move. Tyler would now have to explain why dangerous people might target Victoria, which would lead to questions about what else he'd been hiding. What do you mean, anyone connected to you? These aren't normal people. They don't care about collateral damage. Tyler, what exactly did you do? Gambling? Drugs? What? Does it matter? The only thing that matters is getting them their money before tonight. Yes, it matters. I have children to think about. Ryan smiled grimly. Victoria was beginning to understand that her knight in shining armor was actually a liability. The next few hours would determine whether her greed would override her survival instincts. At 9:15 a.m., Victoria appeared at her bank. Ryan watched from across the street as she spent 45 minutes in heated conversation with a manager, trying to access funds that weren't immediately liquid. Her body language telegraphed frustration and growing panic. Her next stop was her lawyer's office, the same attorney who was handling her divorce proceedings against Ryan. Through Danny's connections in the legal community, Ryan had already learned that Victoria's legal strategy was based on Tyler's assurances that Ryan was hiding millions in military contractor payments. The lawyer, Robert Henley, was about to have a very interesting conversation about the gap between his client's expectations and financial reality. At 11:30 a.m., Ryan's phone buzzed with an update from Danny. Henley just called his investigator off the military contractor angle. Apparently, your wife's boyfriend's financial advice isn't as solid as advertised. The pressure was building exactly as Ryan had calculated. Victoria was learning that Tyler had no money. Tyler was learning that Victoria didn't have enough money to save him, and both were starting to realize that their information about Ryan's assets was worthless. But Ryan wasn't content to simply watch his enemies destroy each other. He wanted them to understand that their destruction wasn't random bad luck. It was the consequence of declaring war on the wrong man. At 2 p.m., Tyler received a text message from an unknown number. Your girlfriend used to be married to someone much more dangerous than us. Ask her about Ryan Mitchell's real job. A friend. The message wasn't signed by Sal's organization. It was a freelance edition that Ryan had authorized through Danny's network. Within 30 minutes, Tyler was calling Victoria in a panic. Baby, who exactly is your husband? What did he do in the military? He's Army Special Forces. What? What kind of special forces? I don't know the details. He never talked about his missions. Tyler, why are you asking this now? Someone just told me that your husband is more dangerous than the people I owe money to. What does that mean? Ryan could hear the fear creeping into Tyler's voice. The pretty boy was starting to understand that he might have chosen the wrong enemy. Ryan isn't dangerous to civilians. He's a soldier. What kind of soldier? The kind that does things other soldiers can't do. Jesus Christ, Victoria. You never thought to mention that your husband kills people for a living. Ex-husband. And he kills terrorists, not personal trainers. Are you sure about that? The line went quiet. Ryan could practically hear Victoria's mind working, remembering conversations about classified operations, about missions Ryan couldn't discuss, about the way he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night with his hand reaching for weapons that weren't there. Tyler, you're scaring me. I'm scaring you? I'm the one who might get killed tonight. Then give them something else. Negotiate. You can't negotiate with these people. And apparently, you can't negotiate with your husband either. Ryan ended the surveillance session and drove to his next appointment. Dr. Patricia Reeves, child psychologist and family counselor, had an office in an upscale professional building downtown. According to Danny's research, she was the therapist Victoria had been using to prepare Emma and Dylan for the divorce. The receptionist was professional but curious when Ryan introduced himself as the children's father and requested an immediate consultation. Mr. Mitchell? Mrs. Mitchell mentioned you might be resistant to family counseling. Did she? What else did she mention? Perhaps I should have Dr. Reeves explain. No, I'd like to hear what my wife told you about me. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. She expressed concerns about your mental state following your deployment. PTSD, anger management issues, potential for violence. Ryan nodded slowly. Victoria had been building a case against him with the therapist, creating a paper trail that would support her claims of an unstable, dangerous father. I see. And what did my children tell Dr. Reeves about these supposed issues? I really can't discuss. Let me save us both some time. Ryan pulled out his phone and played a recording of his conversation with Emma, the one where she questioned Tyler's motives and expressed confusion about her mother's claims. This conversation took place 3 days ago. As you can hear, my daughter doesn't sound afraid of me. She sounds confused about why adults she trusted have been lying to her. The receptionist stared at him with new understanding. I'll see if Dr. Reeves can fit you in immediately. Dr. Reeves was a competent professional who'd been fed a carefully constructed narrative by Victoria and Tyler. But 15 minutes into their conversation, it became clear that the children's actual responses hadn't matched the psychological profile she'd been led to expect. Your children seem remarkably well-adjusted for kids, supposedly traumatized by an unstable father, Dr. Reeves admitted. They express concern for your well-being, but not fear of your behavior, because they have no reason to fear me. They've been manipulated by 2 adults who needed them out of the way while they dismantled our family. These are serious accusations, Mr. Mitchell. Doctor, I've spent 15 years protecting this country from people who specialize in psychological manipulation. I recognize the tactics when they're used against my own children. What do you want from me? I want you to stop treating my children as victims of abuse that never happened. They're victims of manipulation and lies, but not from me. Dr. Reeves studied his file for several minutes. I'd like to schedule individual sessions with Emma and Dylan, without their mother present. Good. But doctor, when you're writing your reports, remember that family court judges don't like therapists who fail to recognize parental alienation when it's happening right in front of them. By 5 p.m., Tyler's 24 hours were down to 6 hours. Victoria had managed to liquidate some investments and withdraw $68,000. Not enough to save Tyler, but enough to make her a target if she refused to hand it over. Ryan's phone buzzed with one final intercepted conversation. Tyler, I can't get the full amount. $68,000 is everything I can access immediately. Then I'm dead. Maybe we should call the police. And tell them what? That I owe money to people who don't exist on paper? Victoria, you don't understand how this works. Then explain it to me. These people, they're connected. They have legitimate businesses, lawyers, politicians on payroll. If I go to the police, I'm signing my own death warrant. What about Ryan? Could he help? Tyler's laugh was bitter. Your husband? The guy we've been stealing from and lying to for months? The guy who kills people for the government? Yeah, I'm sure he'd be happy to help. Maybe if we gave the money back, if we apologized. Victoria, your husband isn't the forgiving type. You said so yourself. He never forgets anything, never lets go of a grudge. We crossed him, and now we're paying for it. You think Ryan is behind this? I think your husband is a lot smarter and a lot more dangerous than either of us realized. Ryan smiled as he listened to his enemies finally begin to understand the depth of their mistake. But understanding was just the beginning. They hadn't even seen his real move yet. Chapter 5, The Trap. The abandoned warehouse in Commerce City had been Danny's idea, neutral ground where Tyler could make his payment without risking a public scene. What Tyler didn't know was that the warehouse had been under surveillance for the past week, every entrance and exit monitored by Ryan's team. At 10:47 p.m., Tyler arrived with Victoria in her Mercedes, carrying a gym bag that supposedly contained $68,000. Ryan watched from a concealed position as they sat in the car, having what appeared to be a final argument before Tyler got out and walked toward the warehouse alone. Victoria's phone rang immediately. She answered, and Ryan could see her talking frantically to someone, probably Tyler's contact inside, trying to negotiate for more time or a payment plan. But Tyler wasn't meeting with Sal Torino's people tonight. He was meeting with Danny, who was posing as a collector willing to take partial payment in exchange for services Tyler didn't yet know he needed. Through his earpiece, Ryan monitored the conversation happening inside the warehouse. $68,000, Tyler said, his voice tight with fear. It's everything I could get on short notice. That leaves $25,000 outstanding, Danny replied in an accent that suggested Eastern European origins. How do you propose to handle this shortage? I need more time. My girlfriend has more money coming in a few weeks when her divorce finalizes. Divorce can be complicated. What if her ex-husband decides to fight? What if the money gets tied up in legal proceedings? He won't fight. He's military, deployed all the time, doesn't pay attention to details. She's already got his accounts cleaned out. Danny's laugh was cold. You think a special operations soldier doesn't pay attention to details? You think a man trained to hunt and kill doesn't notice when someone steals from his family? The silence in the warehouse was profound. Ryan could practically hear Tyler's mind working, trying to process the implications. What are you saying? I'm saying you've been played, kid. Your girlfriend's husband isn't some absent soldier boy. Ryan Mitchell is the kind of man who destabilizes governments for breakfast. And you just stole his money and his family. That's impossible, Victoria said. Victoria said what she needed to say to justify what she wanted to do. But here's the thing about special operators. They're very good at finding people who think they can't be found. Ryan watched Tyler stumble out of the warehouse 15 minutes later, his face pale and his hands shaking. The conversation had accomplished two objectives. Tyler now understood that he was dealing with forces beyond his comprehension, and he was carrying a tracking device that Danny had slipped into his jacket pocket. Victoria was waiting in the car, and their conversation was immediate and heated. What did they say? Did they take the money? We have a bigger problem than the money. What do you mean? Your husband. He's not what you think he is. Tyler, you're scaring me. What happened in there? They knew about Ryan. They knew exactly who he was and what he does for a living. Victoria, we're not dealing with some heartbroken soldier. We're dealing with someone who kills people professionally. You're being paranoid. Am I? Think about it. How many coincidences have happened in the past week? The gambling debt suddenly becoming urgent, right, when we're trying to finalize our plans? The banks freezing your accounts for routine security checks? The kids suddenly asking questions about Tyler? None of this is random. Victoria's silence lasted almost 30 seconds. You think Ryan is behind this? I think your husband has been planning this since the moment he got your text at the airport. From his surveillance position, Ryan watched Victoria's world begin to collapse as she realized the scope of her miscalculation. She'd thought she was leaving a soldier. She'd actually declared war on someone who'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of psychological warfare. But Ryan wasn't done. The tracking device in Tyler's pocket would lead them exactly where he wanted them to go. At 11:30 p.m., Tyler and Victoria drove to the luxury apartment Tyler had rented in her name, the one she'd been paying for without realizing it was a trap. As they climbed the stairs to the third floor, they didn't notice the professional-grade surveillance equipment that had been installed throughout the building. They also didn't notice that all of Tyler's gambling debts had been purchased by a shell company Danny controlled, which meant Sal Torino's boys were no longer the immediate threat. The immediate threat was about to knock on their door. At 11:45 p.m., two men in expensive suits arrived at the apartment building. They weren't thugs. They were lawyers, representing a collection agency that had just purchased Tyler's outstanding obligations. The perfectly legal kind of pressure that left no room for negotiation. Ryan listened through surveillance as they delivered their message. Tyler Brooks now owed $93,000 plus interest and fees to Mountain West Financial Recovery, LLC. Payment was due in full within 24 hours, where the company would begin asset seizure proceedings against both Tyler and any co-signers on his obligations. Co-signers? Victoria's voice was shrill. What co-signers? The lawyers explained that the apartment lease Tyler had rented in her name included a personal guarantee clause that made her liable for any debts Tyler incurred while residing at the property. The clause was buried in the fine print of a 60-page document she'd signed without reading. That's not legal. Ma'am, you signed the document. We have your signature notarized and witnessed. You guaranteed Mr. Brooks' financial obligations. Ryan had to admire the elegance of the trap. Tyler had thought he was clever, putting the apartment in Victoria's name to protect his own credit. Instead, he created a legal liability that now threatened everything she had left. "We need to call my lawyer," Victoria said. "Your lawyer," one of the attorneys replied, "is the one who referred this case to our firm. Apparently, there are questions about potential fraud in your divorce proceedings that require immediate resolution." Victoria's divorce lawyer, the same Robert Henley who'd been building her case against Ryan, had just become part of the problem instead of the solution. Danny's investigation had revealed that Henley had a gambling problem of his own, one that made him susceptible to pressure from the same financial networks that now own Tyler's debts. By midnight, Victoria and Tyler were trapped in a legal maze that threatened to consume everything they'd stolen and everything they hoped to steal. But Ryan still had one more card to play. His phone buzzed with a text to Tyler's phone. "Building is surrounded. Exit through roof access. Trust no one." Anonymous. Ryan watched through thermal imaging as Tyler and Victoria received the message. The paranoia that had been building for days finally reached critical mass. They were now seeing threats everywhere, trusting no one, and making increasingly desperate decisions. At 12:15 a.m., they climbed to the roof of the apartment building, carrying hastily packed bags and looking like refugees fleeing a war zone, which in a sense they were. From his position 3 blocks away, Ryan observed their escape through night vision equipment. They had no plan, no destination, and no understanding of how completely they'd been outmaneuvered. But most importantly, they were now moving toward the location where Ryan wanted them to be for the final phase of his operation. The abandoned mining facility in the mountains outside Denver had been chosen specifically for its isolation and its history. 30 years ago, it had been a profitable silver mine. Now it was a ghost town where people could disappear without anyone asking questions. Tyler and Victoria would drive through the night, following a route that had been carefully planned to lead them to exactly the wrong place at exactly the right time. And when they arrived, Ryan Mitchell would be waiting for them. The war was almost over. Chapter 6, The Pursuit. The mountain road to Silverdale was treacherous on a good day, narrow, winding, with a 100-foot drop on one side and unmarked mining shafts on the other. At 2:30 a.m., with Tyler driving Victoria's Mercedes and both of them operating on pure adrenaline and terror, it was a death trap waiting to happen. Ryan followed at a distance, using night vision and GPS tracking to monitor their progress. The tracking device Danny had planted was working perfectly, showing their route as a moving dot on his tactical display. They were taking exactly the path he'd anticipated, the one that led to the abandoned Silverdale mining complex. Through intercepted phone calls, Ryan had learned that Tyler believed they were heading to a safe house provided by someone who owed him a favor. In reality, the anonymous contact who'd given him the location was another of Danny's assets, and the safe house was the site where Ryan intended to end this war permanently. Victoria's phone rang every 15 minutes. Calls from her lawyer, her bank, the private school where Emma and Dylan were enrolled. Each call brought worse news. Henley had discovered that several documents in her divorce filing contained false information about Ryan's assets. The bank was freezing her remaining accounts, pending an investigation into potential money laundering. The school was asking questions about the legitimacy of the tuition payments. Everything Victoria had built over the past 10 months was collapsing simultaneously, and she was beginning to understand that the collapse wasn't coincidental. "Tyler, we need to go to the police." "And tell them what?" "That we think my girlfriend's ex-husband is orchestrating a conspiracy against us. They'll laugh us out of the station." "Then what do we do?" We get to the safe house, we lay low for a few days, and we figure out our next move. What if there is no next move? What if Ryan planned all of this? Then we're already dead. Ryan smiled grimly as he listened to their conversation. They were finally beginning to grasp the scope of their situation, but their understanding was still incomplete. They thought they were fleeing from Ryan's revenge. They didn't realize they were walking directly into it. At 3:15 a.m., the Mercedes turned off the main highway onto the unpaved road that led to Silverdale. The mining complex was still 12 miles ahead, but this was where Ryan's plan entered its final phase. He activated a signal jammer that cut off all cell phone communication in a 5-mile radius. Tyler and Victoria were now isolated, unable to call for help or contact their mysterious benefactor. More importantly, they couldn't receive the messages that would warn them they were driving into a trap. The Silverdale mining complex had been abandoned since 1987, when a combination of declining silver prices and environmental concerns had forced its closure. The main buildings were intact, but empty, perfect for hosting conversations that required absolute privacy. Ryan arrived 30 minutes before Tyler and Victoria, using the time to position surveillance equipment and prepare the site. The main office building would serve as his command center, offering clear sight lines to all approaches while providing cover and concealment. At 4:02 a.m., the Mercedes headlights appeared at the bottom of the access road. Ryan watched through night vision as Tyler drove slowly up the winding path, clearly nervous about the isolation and the condition of the buildings. They parked in front of the main office and sat in the car for several minutes, arguing about whether to approach the building or wait in the vehicle. Finally, Tyler got out and walked toward the entrance, calling out for someone named Marcus, the fictional contact who'd supposedly arranged their sanctuary. The building was empty, of course. Tyler spent 10 minutes searching the first floor before returning to the car to report that no one was there. "This doesn't feel right," Victoria said. "Why would Marcus tell us to come here if he's not here? Maybe he's running late. Maybe he got held up. Or maybe this whole thing is a setup." Tyler's phone buzzed with a text message, the last communication he would receive that night. "Change of plans. Meet at Building 3. Come alone. M." Building 3 was the old processing facility, a concrete structure built into the hillside that had once housed the equipment for extracting silver from raw ore. It was also where Ryan was waiting. Tyler made the walk alone, leaving Victoria in the car with the engine running. Ryan observed his approach through thermal imaging, noting the slight tremor in Tyler's hands and the way he kept looking over his shoulder. The processing facility was dark except for a single battery-powered lantern that Ryan had placed in the center of the main floor. Tyler called out as he entered, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Marcus? I'm here. Where are you?" "Marcus isn't coming." Ryan stepped out of the shadows, and Tyler spun around, his face going pale in the lantern light. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Tyler was face to face with the husband he'd betrayed, the soldier he'd underestimated, the enemy he'd thought he could defeat through manipulation and lies. "Hello, Tyler." "Ryan. Jesus, how did you find you? I've been tracking you since you left the apartment. Actually, I've been tracking you since you started fucking my wife." Tyler took a step backward, his hand reaching for his phone before remembering that the cell service was dead. "Look, man, I know you're angry, but..." "Angry?" Ryan's laugh was cold. "Tyler, anger is what I felt when I first read Victoria's text. What I'm feeling now is something much more focused. We can work this out. Victoria still loves you. She was confused, scared about you being gone all the time. I took advantage of that, and I'm sorry." "No, you're not sorry. You're terrified. There's a difference." Ryan began walking slowly around Tyler, staying just outside the circle of lantern light. The psychological effect was immediate. Tyler started turning to keep Ryan in sight, but the constant movement made him dizzy and disoriented. "You made several critical errors in your planning, Tyler. Would you like me to explain them?" "Ryan, please." "First, you assumed I was a typical soldier, someone who follows orders and doesn't think strategically. But I'm not typical, am I, Tyler? I'm the kind of soldier who gets sent to solve problems that can't be solved through conventional means." Tyler's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. Panic was setting in. Second, you assumed that Victoria understood what kind of man she was married to. But Victoria never asked about my real job, never wanted to know about the classified operations or the special skills I've developed over 15 years of very specialized service. What do you want from me? Third, and most importantly, you assumed that I would react emotionally instead of tactically. You thought I'd either beg Victoria to come back or make stupid mistakes because I was hurt. Instead, I treated this like any other mission. Ryan stopped circling and stood directly in front of Tyler, close enough that the younger man could see the absolute absence of mercy in his eyes. And my missions always succeed, Tyler. Always. Are you going to kill me? That depends on your answer to one question. Where are my children? What? Emma and Dylan. Were they really? Because I know they're not at Westfield Academy anymore. Tyler's confusion was genuine. They're at the academy. Victoria enrolled them 3 weeks ago. I called the school this afternoon. They've been withdrawn. Victoria pulled them out yesterday and told the administration they were transferring to a private facility in Switzerland. The color drained from Tyler's face. That's impossible. Victoria never mentioned. Victoria has been planning to disappear with my children and whatever money she could steal. You, Tyler, were never part of the long-term plan. You were a useful idiot who helped her justify leaving her marriage and provided cover for her real agenda. No, she loves me. We're building a life together. You were building a fantasy while she was building an escape route. The question is, are you going to help me find my children, or are you going to die protecting the woman who's been lying to both of us? Tyler stared at him, the full scope of his situation finally becoming clear. Victoria had played him as completely as he'd thought he was playing Ryan. But now Ryan was offering him something Victoria never had, a chance to survive his mistakes. I don't know where they are, Tyler said quietly. I swear to God, Ryan, I don't know. Ryan studied Tyler's face, using skills developed through years of interrogating enemy combatants. Fear, confusion, and genuine ignorance. Tyler was telling the truth. Then you and I are going to find out together. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Victoria had been waiting in the Mercedes for 27 minutes when the first shots echoed from the processing building. 3 sharp cracks that could have been gunfire or could have been the old structure settling in the mountain cold. But when Tyler didn't emerge after 5 more minutes, she knew something had gone very wrong. Her hands shook as she tried to start the engine, but the car wouldn't turn over. The battery was dead, impossible, since they'd driven here without any problems. Unless someone had sabotaged the vehicle while Tyler was inside. Through the windshield, she saw a figure walking toward her from the processing building. Not Tyler's confident swagger, but the measured stride of someone who moved with military precision. Even in the darkness, she recognized the silhouette. Ryan. Victoria fumbled for the door handle, but the locks had been engaged remotely. She was trapped in a dead car while her husband approached with the calm deliberation of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. He reached the driver's side window and gestured for her to roll it down. When she didn't comply, he tapped gently on the glass with what appeared to be Tyler's cell phone. Victoria, we need to talk. Where's Tyler? Her voice was muffled by the window, but Ryan could hear the fear. Tyler is indisposed, but he's been very helpful in clarifying a few things about your plans. What plans? The Swiss boarding school, the numbered accounts, the new identities. Ryan's smile was cold. Tyler was surprised to learn that he wasn't included in your exit strategy. Victoria's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Open the door, Victoria. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we're going to do this. She hit the button to roll down the window a few inches. Ryan, please. We can work this out. Can we? The same way you worked out our marriage? The same way you worked out Tyler's gambling debts? The same way you worked out turning our children against me? The children love you. They're just confused. The children are missing. Ryan's voice carried a note of menace that made Victoria shrink back in her seat. Emma and Dylan were withdrawn from Westfield Academy yesterday. Their current location is unknown. Their safety is now my primary concern. They're safe. They're with my sister in Phoenix. Your sister who died in a car accident 6 months ago. Victoria's mouth opened and closed silently. She'd forgotten that Ryan knew about her sister's death, forgotten that her carefully constructed lies had obvious gaps that any trained investigator would spot immediately. Victoria, you have approximately 30 seconds to tell me where my children are before I stop asking politely. They're with a private security company in Switzerland. It's a legitimate service for high-net-worth families who need protection during sensitive situations. What kind of sensitive situations? Divorce proceedings where one parent might pose a threat to the children's well-being. Ryan nodded slowly. You hired a company to hide our children from me because you convinced them I was dangerous. You are dangerous. Look at what you've done to Tyler. Look at what you've done to us. What I've done is respond to an attack on my family using appropriate tactical measures. What you've done is kidnap my children. It's not kidnapping. I'm their mother. You're a mother who filed false police reports claiming I was unstable. You're a mother who convinced a therapist that I was abusive without any evidence. You're a mother who turned my own children against me using psychological manipulation techniques. Ryan leaned closer to the window. Most importantly, you're a mother who removed my children from U.S. jurisdiction to prevent me from exercising my parental rights. Victoria was crying now, tears streaming down her face as the full scope of her legal exposure became clear. International child abduction was a federal crime, one that would result in decades in prison. I was protecting them. From what? From a father who never raised his voice to them? From a father who never missed a school play or soccer game when he was in the country? From a father who spent 15 years putting his life on the line so they could grow up safe and free? From a father who kills people for a living? I eliminate threats to American security. It's a job I'm very good at, and it's the reason you live in a nice house and the children went to good schools and you never had to worry about money. Ryan's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But you know what the most important part of my job is, Victoria? She shook her head. Finding people who don't want to be found. Extracting assets from hostile environments. Recovering stolen property. He smiled. You've just given me a new mission. Ryan, please. We can fix this. I'll bring them back. We'll go to counseling. We'll work it out. No, we won't. Because this stopped being about our marriage the moment you involved our children in your exit strategy. Ryan pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. It displayed a map of Europe with a blinking red dot in Switzerland. I've already located them. Emma's cell phone is still active, and she sent me a text message 3 hours ago asking when I was coming to get them. Victoria stared at the phone in horror. That's impossible. The company took their phones. The company took the phones you knew about. Emma has been carrying a secondary device I gave her before my last deployment. Standard protocol for military families in case of emergency communications. You've been tracking our children? I've been protecting our children. From threats I didn't know included their own mother. Ryan opened the car door remotely and gestured for Victoria to get out. She complied slowly, her legs unsteady as she stood in the cold mountain air. What happens now? Now you're going to call your contact at the security company and arrange for Emma and Dylan to be returned to U.S. custody immediately. And if I refuse, then I'll handle the extraction personally, which would be unfortunate for everyone involved, since I wouldn't feel constrained by the same legal limitations that govern your private security company. Victoria understood the threat. Ryan would recover his children with or without her cooperation, but her cooperation might be the only thing that prevented the situation from becoming an international incident. If I make the call, what happens to me? That depends on how quickly you can make this right. And Tyler? Ryan's smile was predatory. Tyler is learning about the consequences of poor decision-making. Victoria's hands trembled as she dialed the number. The conversation was brief and conducted in German, but Ryan's linguistic training allowed him to follow the key points. The children would be returned to a neutral location in Geneva within 48 hours, where they could be officially transferred to their father's custody. It's done, she said after hanging up. Good. Now we wait. For what? For my children to come home, and for you to face the consequences of trying to steal them. Victoria looked around the abandoned mining complex, at the empty buildings and the dark mountains that surrounded them. Are you going to kill me? Victoria, I've spent the last week systematically destroying everything you thought you'd built with Tyler. Your relationship, your finances, your legal strategy, your escape plan, all of it is gone. You have no money, no allies, no future, and no children. So yes, you're going to kill me. No, I'm going to let you live with the knowledge of what you've lost and why you lost it. Death would be mercy. This is justice. Ryan walked back toward the processing building, leaving Victoria alone beside her disabled car with no way to leave and nowhere to go. In 48 hours, he would be reunited with Emma and Dylan. Victoria would be facing federal charges for international child abduction. And Tyler Brooks would be learning that some enemies are too dangerous to make and too unforgiving to survive. The war was almost over. Chapter 8. Geneva. The Hotel de Bergs overlooked Lake Geneva with the kind of understated elegance that attracted diplomats, international businessmen, and people who needed to conduct sensitive negotiations away from prying eyes. Ryan had chosen it specifically because the Swiss took neutrality seriously and because the hotel security was professional enough to handle situations that might become complicated. Emma and Dylan were waiting in the lobby when Ryan arrived, flanked by two representatives from Securitas International, the private company Victoria had hired to protect them. The children looked tired, confused, and significantly older than the 15-year-olds he'd left behind 3 months ago. Emma saw him first and broke away from her handlers, running across the marble floor to throw herself into his arms. Dylan followed more slowly, his face a mixture of relief and uncertainty. "Daddy," Emma whispered against his chest. "We didn't know what was happening. They said Mom sent us here for our safety, but then no one would tell us when we could come home." Ryan held both children, feeling something inside him shift from cold tactical calculation to protective fury. Victoria hadn't just betrayed him. She'd traumatized their children by turning them into pawns in her escape strategy. "It's over now," he said quietly. "You're safe, and you're coming home with me." The Securitas representatives approached with professional courtesy. Ryan noted their positioning, their equipment, and their obvious discomfort with the situation. They were legitimate security contractors who'd been hired under false pretenses. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Andreas Weber, Operations Manager for Securitas International. We need to discuss the circumstances under which your children were placed in our care." "What circumstances were you told?" "That you were psychologically unstable following military deployment and posed a potential threat to their safety. We were provided with documentation from a licensed therapist and a family court filing that supported these claims." Ryan smiled grimly. "And when did you realize that documentation was fraudulent?" Weber's expression confirmed Ryan's suspicion. "When our background investigation revealed that you hold multiple commendations for psychological stability under extreme stress, and that no family court in Colorado has any record of proceedings involving you or your children." "How long have you known?" 48 hours. "We began making arrangements for their return as soon as we discovered the discrepancies." "And my wife's payment for your services?" "The accounts she used to pay our fees have been frozen by international banking authorities. We're currently investigating potential money laundering violations." Ryan nodded. Even in Switzerland, Victoria's financial manipulations were catching up with her. The money she'd used to hire the security company had been traced back to accounts connected to Tyler's gambling debts and the fraudulent loans he'd taken out in her name. "Mr. Mitchell," Weber continued, "we need to understand what happened to Mrs. Mitchell and her associate. Our last contact with them was 72 hours ago. They're being dealt with through appropriate channels." Meaning they're no longer your concern." Weber studied Ryan's face and apparently decided not to press the issue. "The children are free to go with you immediately. We've prepared all necessary documentation for their departure." An hour later, Ryan was sitting with Emma and Dylan in a quiet restaurant near the hotel, listening to their account of the past 3 days. The picture that emerged was of a mother who'd become increasingly desperate and erratic as her plans unraveled. "She called us the night before we left," Dylan said. "She was crying, saying that you were dangerous, that you'd been changed by the war, that we needed to be somewhere safe until she could get help for you." "Did you believe her?" Emma and Dylan exchanged glances. "We didn't know what to believe," Emma admitted. "You have been different since you got back. Quieter, more serious. And Tyler kept saying things about soldiers who came back broken." What kind of things? That PTSD made people violent. That sometimes soldiers hurt their families without meaning to. That maybe it would be better if we gave you space to get help. Ryan felt the cold fury building again. Tyler and Victoria hadn't just manipulated the children's fears. They'd weaponized those fears against him. Do you want to know what really happened while I was deployed? Both children nodded. I was part of a team that rescued 43 American civilians from a terrorist compound in Eastern Europe. We spent 6 weeks planning the operation, 2 weeks infiltrating the area, and 4 hours executing the rescue. Every civilian survived. None of my team was killed. Mom said you were doing secret things. Dark things. I was doing necessary things. Things that kept people like you safe from people who would hurt you for being American, for being free, for being everything those terrorists hate about our way of life. Dylan leaned forward. Then why did Mom say you were dangerous? Because your mother was planning to leave me and take you both out of the country. She needed a reason that would make you cooperate and make the authorities believe her story. So she invented a narrative about a dangerous, unstable father. But Tyler said whatever your mother told him to say. Tyler was never interested in your well-being, Emma. He was interested in your mother's money and her willingness to help him escape his gambling debts. Both children were quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. Are we going home now? Dylan asked finally. Yes, but there are some things you need to understand. Your mother is going to face serious criminal charges for taking you out of the country without legal authority. Tyler is facing charges related to fraud and conspiracy. Your lives are going to be different from now on. Different how? You'll live with me. You'll finish high school in Denver. You'll have counseling to help process what's happened. And you'll learn that sometimes the people who claim to protect you are actually the ones you need protection from. Emma reached across the table and took his hand. Daddy, are you going to forgive Mom? Ryan looked at his daughter, 15 years old, trying to understand how the adults in her life had failed her so completely. No, sweetheart, I'm not. But she's our mother. She's a woman who kidnapped my children and tried to steal my life. The fact that she gave birth to you doesn't excuse what she's done. Will we ever see her again? That depends on a lot of factors that haven't been decided yet. As they walked back to the hotel to collect their belongings, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Package delivered to appropriate authorities. Both subjects in federal custody. Cleanup complete. Victoria and Tyler were now in the hands of law enforcement officials who would handle the remaining details. Ryan's war was officially over. But for Emma and Dylan, the healing was just beginning. Chapter 9, New Foundations. 6 months later, Ryan stood in the kitchen of their new house in Lakewood, watching Emma and Dylan get ready for school. The house was smaller than their previous home, but it was theirs, bought with money that Victoria couldn't touch, in a neighborhood where Tyler Brooks would never be welcome. The legal proceedings had concluded with the kind of efficiency that came from having overwhelming evidence and defendants who couldn't afford competent representation. Victoria had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for international child abduction and conspiracy to commit fraud. Tyler had received 12 years for fraud, extortion, and violation of his parole terms from previous convictions. Both had attempted to implicate Ryan in various crimes during their trials, but their credibility had been destroyed by months of documented lies and manipulation. The jury had seen them as exactly what they were, predators who targeted the wrong family and paid the price for their miscalculation. Emma and Dylan had testified in closed session about the psychological manipulation they'd endured. Dr. Reeves, the family therapist, had provided expert testimony about parental alienation and its effects on children. The evidence had been so overwhelming that both defendants had eventually accepted plea agreements rather than face even longer sentences. Dad, are you going to the parent-teacher conference tonight? Emma asked as she grabbed her backpack. Wouldn't miss it. How's the algebra coming? Better. Mr. Patterson says I might be able to skip ahead to advanced math next semester. Ryan smiled. Emma's grades had improved dramatically once she was out from under the stress of living in a household built on lies and manipulation. Dylan had made similar progress, though he still struggled with trust issues that would take time to resolve. Dylan, you ready for the science fair? Almost. Just need to finish the presentation. Dylan paused at the door. Dad, do you think Mom will try to contact us when she gets out? It was a question both children asked periodically, usually when they were processing their emotions about the divorce and everything that had happened. She'll be eligible for parole in 5 years if she demonstrates good behavior and completes the required counseling programs. Whether she tries to contact you will depend on whether she's learned to take responsibility for her choices. Do you think she has? Ryan considered the question carefully. The last communication he'd received from Victoria had been a letter filled with accusations, self-pity, an attempt to shift blame to everyone except herself. She showed no signs of understanding the scope of her betrayal or its impact on their children. I think your mother believes she was justified in everything she did. Until that changes, she'll remain dangerous to both of you. But she's our mom. Yes, she is. And that makes what she did even more unforgivable. After the children left for school, Ryan sat in his home office reviewing the final reports from Danny's investigation. Every loose end had been tied up, every potential threat neutralized. Tyler's gambling associates had been paid off through the seizure of his assets. Victoria's divorce lawyer had been disbarred for filing fraudulent documents. The private security company had refunded their fees and implemented new verification procedures. The war was over, but Ryan remained vigilant. He'd learned that the people closest to you could become the most dangerous enemies, and he would never again make the mistake of trusting completely. His phone rang. Danny, how are the kids adjusting? Better, every day. Emma made honor roll last semester, and Dylan joined the robotics club. And you? Ryan looked around his office, at the pictures of Emma and Dylan, at the commendations from his military service, at the life he'd rebuilt from the ashes of his marriage. I'm exactly where I need to be. Any regrets? About what? About how far you took it. You could have just divorced her, fought for custody, moved on with your life. Ryan considered the question. Danny, she stole my children and tried to erase me from their lives. She turned them against me using psychological warfare techniques. She planned to disappear to another country with money she'd stolen from accounts I'd funded with 15 years of combat pay. And she chose to make war on someone who's very good at war. The only thing I regret is that she and Tyler didn't understand the consequences of their choices before they made them. You destroyed their lives completely. They destroyed their own lives. I just ensured that the consequences caught up with them faster than they expected. That evening, Ryan sat in the bleachers at Emma's soccer game, watching his daughter play with the confidence of a young woman who was learning to trust the world again. Dylan sat beside him, working on homework while keeping one eye on the game. Dad, Dylan said during halftime, sometimes kids at school ask about Mom. What should I tell them? Tell them the truth. That your mother made choices that hurt our family, and now she's facing the consequences of those choices. Will they understand? Some will, some won't. But understanding other people's situations isn't your responsibility, Dylan. Taking care of yourself and being honest about what happened is. Do you think we'll be okay? As a family, I mean. Ryan looked at his son, 15 years old, thoughtful, resilient despite everything he'd been through. I think we're going to be better than okay. I think we're going to be stronger than we ever were before. Because we survived what Mom and Tyler did to us. Because we learned that family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about people who choose to protect each other, who choose to tell the truth even when it's difficult, who choose to put the family's well-being above their own desires. As the game resumed, Ryan reflected on the path that had brought them to this point. Victoria had thought she could discard him like an inconvenient soldier who'd outlived his usefulness. Tyler had thought he could prey on a military family without consequences. Both had learned that some enemies are too dangerous to make and too unforgiving to survive their mistakes. But for Ryan, Emma, and Dylan, survival wasn't enough anymore. They were building something new, a family based on truth, trust, and the understanding that some bonds can only be forged in the fire of shared adversity. The war was over. Their real life was just beginning. And Ryan Mitchell, the man who never forgave betrayal and never forgot an enemy, had found the only thing more powerful than revenge: the love of children who understood that their father would always protect them, no matter the cost. And there you have it, another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.